That's right. It's quite a major update for Indian pharma. Donald Trump has finally put numbers and timelines around his proposed tariffs on generic drugs. And while the immediate relief is undeniable for a few companies, the long-term challenges for Indian pharma as a whole is far from over as it seems. Here's why. Under the new plan, there will be no tariffs for generic medicines for the next 2 years, between August 2026 and 2028. But after that is where costs start to rise up very sharply. A 100% tariff kicks in from 2028, and that doubles to 200% starting from 2029. So now the question is 2 years enough time for Indian pharma players to prepare for this? Building a generic drug manufacturing plant in the US is not a quick exercise by any means. It can easily take 12 to 24 months and even longer if you factor in that volumes also need to be ramping up, especially after factoring in regulatory approvals and customer qualifications, which is all the more difficult to obtain in US compared to right here in India. That means that companies don't already have a US footprint. These companies may also not have the balance sheet to invest aggressively and could find it difficult to shift meaningful productions from India to the US before these tariffs start kicking in. And that is a significant caveat because US is India's biggest pharma export market. Nearly 90% of the prescription drugs dispensed in the US are generic drugs, and India exported roughly $30 billion worth of pharmaceuticals in the past year in FY25, and more than $10.5 billion, or roughly 1/3 of this, went directly to the US. Among pharma companies as well, Aurobindo Pharma, Zydus Life Sciences, Biocon, and Dr. Reddy's. These are some of the companies having the highest exposure to the US market, with nearly half of their revenues linked directly to the US. We've also got Piramal Pharma, Lupin, Sun Pharma, and Cipla with meaningful exposures to the geography as well. Now, the good news from this is that several large players, including Sun Pharma, Dr. Reddy's, Aurobindo, Lupin, Zydus, and Cipla, these players already have their manufacturing facilities set up in the US, which gives them a head start if local manufacturing does become a necessity going forward. However, not everyone is equally prepared. Biocon, for instance, has only recently commissioned a facility in New Jersey, which will take some time to ramp up, and a large part of Biocon's manufacturing is still dependent from India and Malaysia. The pressure could be even greater for more mid-sized companies, as apart from investing in new plants, they'll also have to deal with fresh regulatory approvals, rising construction costs, which is partly due to the higher tariffs on materials like aluminium, and also the time which is needed to ramp up commercial production once all the groundwork is laid down over there. So the takeaway from this all is that in the short term, while some overhang of a potential generic tariff is cleared for most pharma companies, but in the long term, that is the one to watch. The message of here is very clear. If the US does follow through with these tariffs, which is again a highly likely and debatable point on its own, but if it does follow through, then manufacturing in America will become increasingly important for these Indian companies, and companies with existing US facilities are likely to be better positioned, while export-only generic players could be seen taking the brunt of all of the costs associated with it. With it comes the cost of higher capex, margin pressure, and a more challenging road ahead for these players.
Okay, Meryl, thanks so much for joining us.